Happy New Year. It is a new year, and we're already a couple of weeks into the new year. And I'll have to say, some of us haven't even taken down all our Christmas decorations yet. I guess we're not ready, maybe, to let go of everything from last year. I don't know. I don't know if you're in the same boat as I am there, but it has been 365 days since a year ago, and it's been 8,760 hours since a year ago, and it's been 525,600 minutes since a year ago today. That's a lot of time. And the Earth has moved around the sun an entire time once, but it's traveled at 584 million miles to do so at a rate of 66,700 miles per hour. That's 1.6 million miles a day. And the Earth has traveled, just in the time I've been speaking about this, 1,111 miles, just in the moment. And so I have to ask myself, have I changed with all of that distance traveled and all of that time passing? How have I changed? When I look back, I think certainly I would have changed since a year ago. And there should have been more change that there is than a year ago. See, there are some things I'd like to do differently in my life. And some of those things I wanted to do differently last year. So I have to ask myself, if I didn't do it last year, through all that distance traveled and all that time passing, what makes me think I'm going to do it this year? What makes me think that? At Centers for Spiritual Living, the topic for the month is a grand rising, and they give suggested titles for talks. Last week we had It's a New Dawn. Today is It's a New Day, and then Roy Kidd will speak about It's a New Life. And the suggested one for the last one is And I'm Feeling Good. So sound familiar? It sounds like a song we heard last week, right? But with his talk title, It's a New Day, I really had to ask myself, how do I really make this day new? How do I do that? Especially considering one of my favorite statistics, that we have maybe in between 30 to 60,000 thoughts per day. And 80% of those are negative, they tell us. And 95% of them are the same thoughts we had the exact day before. The exact same thoughts we had the day before. So if I'm continually thinking the same thoughts I had the day before, how can I expect change to occur? How? Something has to break that cycle. And I tell you, I don't think that personally, I mean, I'm pretty involved in New Thought here, but I don't think personally that I'm capable of addressing each one of those 60,000 thoughts and changing it. So what needs to change here is something more foundational, something more fundamental, so that the mind isn't always thinking those thoughts, something, a change in the atmosphere surrounding my thoughts and the entire energy of it all. A change. And how can we go about this fundamental shift? How can we do that? We have to make space for it somehow. Another thing, in looking at the talk this day, I noticed that tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And usually I go to my bookshelf and pull a book or two for quotes that I'd like to pull into the service. And And I thought today I'd like to quote from King. And so I pulled the book, A Gift of Love, which has several of his sermons in it. A lot of his personality, who he is, comes through them. And I decided that for tools to make this fundamental change in our lives, that for those tools I was going to take everything from his book, all of the quotes today. So I do have some suggestions for us, and the acronym of the day is SOS. Now, that's not because the ship's not sinking, but in my case, there are some things I'd like to be done differently. So it's a little bit of there's a little bit of urgency here. SOS. The first S, and how to be fundamental in how we change the basic, the foundation of how we go about our lives, is the first S is surrender. Surrender. Now, Martin Luther King Jr., he was in a different religious tradition than we are, and it was a while back, okay, not in current day exactly. And they used words like sin and evil. But when I might quote something from him on that, just know that in New Thought we don't believe in sin and the condemnation and all that. We just see it as something that really we'd like to improve on, something that's maybe harmful to us or to other people, something that perhaps it's a bad habit. Perhaps we can't, we haven't been in control of our weight or our drinking, or maybe we're a little bit too selfish when it comes to something, or maybe there's more negativity in our life. Maybe we're rejecting of things, just those sorts of things. So just interpret the word sin as that. Now, King mentions that as we go along, we realize how destructive this habit that we have is, and how it erodes our character by us keeping on doing it, and says that, well, perhaps we make a resolution to change it, and then 365 days later we're kind of surprised that it hasn't changed. So then maybe the next year we think, well, I can't do it. Obviously I can't do it. I'm going to let God do it. I'm going to let God make that change in my life. And then a few months down the road, we take a look and it's like, it's still there. And we think, well, why didn't God take it? And King says that God will not remove something when we stand idly by and just wait for it to take responsibility, not us. He says, one cannot remove an evil habit by mere resolution, nor by simply calling on God to do the job, but only as he surrenders himself and becomes an instrument of God. We should be delivered from the accumulated weight of evil only when we permit the energy of God to come into our souls. See, he's not talking about just thinking about God or just throwing something onto God so that God can take care of it. He's talking about being an instrument of the presence. I'm reminded of, it's either Hafiz or Rumi, one of them says, I'm the hole in the flute through which God, the air, the presence plays. Be an instrument of God to actually permit the energy of God to come into our souls. So when I read that, of course, I'm not just thinking about the mind, because we know the mind is fallible. I'm thinking about the energetic presence that I am, the consciousness, the essence of life, of the life force that is within me, to surrender the mind to that, to let that energy be what rules me. And there's a little practice that I have that's helpful, and maybe you'll join me in it. It's called subject, object, subject. I got it from Dr. Sue Morter. But if you will just give me all of your attention right now, I put all of your attention right on the screen. And that's That's when you might call what you're looking at the object. But if you want to bring it back to subject, which is yourself, pull your attention back. Just pull it back. Pull it back so that the sense you have is more within your own, perhaps your own brain, your own beingness, your own physical body. Everything out here may look a little more fuzzy. It may not be so sharp because you're pulling your attention back. See, when I do that, I'm able to sense the essence that I am, the energetic presence that I am. And hopefully you can do that too. What you're sensing is the presence, the presence. And that is what we want this energy for us to be possessed of, to surrender the mind to this presence, to have the mind not reach out there, because it's always reaching out there for what else it needs to fix the fear that it's based on. But so have the mind not focus on that, but focus within on the presence. That's true surrender. When we do that, we can hear that intuitive small voice. We can know that essence, that presence. We can more easily be in and aware of the presence of love. There's a line that King quotes out of 2 Corinthians that says, "If anyone is in Christ, they're a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come." And of course, in New Thought circles, we know that Christ is not a person, that Christ is that presence. It's that essence that is who and what we are. That if we're in that, then we're new. Then we can hear what is new, what is right in the moment, rather than those 60,000 thoughts, 95% of which we had yesterday. So surrender to presence. Surrender to presence. That's the first S. The O in our bucket of tools today stands for others. In one of his sermons, Dr. King is talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan, about the guy who was robbed and beaten and left on the side of the road, and two guys just passing by leave him there, but then there's another guy that helps him, and he's talking about being a good neighbor, what it talks about being a good neighbor, and he says the good neighbor didn't ask, if I were to stop to help this person, what will happen to me? Like, will there be more robbers hiding? Is somebody going to think that I'm unclean now that I've helped this person? He said, no, he didn't stop to think, what will happen to me? He reversed the question and said, if I do not stop to help this person, what will happen to him? What will happen to him? Not me. It's the other. Looking at the other in terms of whether or not we want to do something. I saw this story in the book, I Am a Miracle, that the reading came out of by M.K. Elder. And this was an actual happening in her life. She and her boyfriend were in her car. They were driving down a thoroughfare, kind of a main thoroughfare in their town. And it was Thanksgiving Day. They were at a red light going to make a left-hand turn. And there were 2 lanes of traffic to their right. And there was a big mall over to the right. And usually the mall has a lot of cars, but it didn't have a lot of cars that day, probably because of the holiday. And she noticed that there was a young girl traveling on a moped from the left, from this neighborhood area, traveling across. Of course, there was the red light, so she was traveling across to get to the malls. To do what? We don't know. Practice the moped, something. And Kay says that she was stopped, the car to her right was stopped, and then there was another lane. And unfortunately, an elderly couple did not see the red light in that lane. And just as the girl was in the middle of that lane, they hit her. Full force, no brakes. Girl flew off the moped, hit the hood, hit the windshield, shattered the windshield because the force was so great, flew up in the air and landed on the asphalt. Kay said that she said that she jumped out of her car and ran to the girl. She ran there, that the girl was, she was, her limbs were shaking and erratically, and she looked like she was having a convulsion. Her eyes were rolled back in her head. She had suffered a tremendous trauma. And Kay, she wasn't a medical personnel, okay, but she had been studying. She'd been studying the power of subconscious mind. She was very interested in personal growth, and so she started speaking to the girl in terms of how strong she was, just positive messages like your body and your spirit are strong and you're healthy, and soon you're going to feel so much better than even you feel now, that you're going to feel even stronger. She didn't at all talk about the trauma. She didn't talk about um, what the girl actually looked like, which was really bad. She just kept speaking, and then people kept gathering around, and she kind of felt that, but she just kept speaking those positive words, and she hears a voice that she recognizes it's somebody from her work, and they're telling her, Kay, step back, stop doing that, you might get sued for doing that. But she didn't listen to that voice. There were other voices that were saying, oh my gosh, what, that girl has very little chance. She's probably going to die. It looked so bad. But she didn't pay attention to that. She knew she had to focus on the strength and the positiveness of her message. And she cupped her hands to so she could almost make like a megaphone over the girl's ears, so that the girl would hear her and not everybody else that was making all of these other comments. And she kept up firmly, calmly, her messages of strength and of positivity. The ambulance finally came, and fortunately, she was able to get the girl's last name before the ambulance took her to the hospital. And she thought, her parents probably would like to know about this sooner than they're going to be reached somehow. And so she went, and she knew the street names that were in that neighborhood were kind of odd, so she matched the last name with one of those odd street names, and she called this home and spoke with the daughter's mother, and said, let her know that an accident happened. Her daughter was in the hospital. Tried to be calm about it, but that they would want to go there. And throughout the day, she kept thinking about that young girl. She knew, she believed in the power of the subconscious. She believed in what she had done, but she also knew how serious this accident was. And so she just wasn't sure. And so later on in the day, toward the evening, she still wanted to be of service, and so she thought she'd pick up the phone and call the mother again. So she called and asked to speak to the mother. And she asked about, kind of gingerly, because she wasn't sure what had happened, she asked about the daughter's condition. And the mother said, oh, that was her who answered the phone. Kay said, having seen the extreme physical trauma that this girl had been through, it was nearly impossible to believe that she was doing fine and was back at home. I knew in that instant that I'd played a major role in her recovery, and I believe in saving her life. Others. Doing for others. King tells us the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The true neighbor will risk his position, his prestige, and even his life for the welfare of others. In dangerous valleys and hazardous pathways, he will lift some bruised and beaten brother to a higher and more noble life. We can change our foundation by doing for others. That's the O. The final S in SOS, our acronym of the day, stands for servant. And before you say, okay, I'm tuning out now, I don't want to hear about being a servant, just understand that all being a servant means is that we serve others. It doesn't mean that we're in a some kind of bondage or something. It just means we serve others. We have that heart. And in the particular sermon that King was giving on this, he quoted a place in Mark, in the book of Mark, where two of Jesus's disciples are saying, "Hey, Jesus, when you're gone from here, we want to be one on your right and one on your left side." And King notes that that Jesus said, whoever wants to be first among you is going to be the servant to all. Whoever wants to be greatest will be a servant. He notes that Jesus didn't say, "Oh, you're wicked for wanting to be first." No, he didn't say that. King says this: it's a good instinct if you don't distort it and pervert it, the one to be great, to be first. He said, keep feeling the need for being important, keep feeling the need for being first. But I want you to be first in love. I want you to be first in moral excellence. I want you to be first in generosity. That's what I want you to do. Be first in those things, because Jesus can't make you great. You must earn it. He noted that Jesus, that Christed being, he gave us a new norm of greatness. Whoever's greatest among you will be your servant. See, the mind with its tens of thousands of thoughts today is going to be looking at how it can come out on top, because the mind is fear-based. It's going to look at how I can win. It's going to do all of these comparisons. How am I doing in relation to this person? How am I doing in relation to that? Maybe I need to step up my game over here, or maybe I need to work a little bit harder so I can get some more stuff. That's the mind. And King says, no, don't go after those things. Do what the master told us, and that is be a servant. Be a first in love. Be a first in moral excellence. That's how you want to be the first. So SOS is our acronym, or our tools for the day to pull us into a new day and a new year. Surrender. Surrender the mind to presence. The O is think of others and what will happen to them if I don't help. And the S is become a servant leader. I'd like to go over into just a few moments of meditation before the treatment. If you would close your eyes, I want to read something from one of Dr. King's sermons. If any of you are around when I have to meet my day, I don't want a long funeral. And if you get somebody to deliver the eulogy, not to talk too long. Now and then I wonder what I want them to say. Tell them not to mention that I have a Nobel Peace Prize. That isn't important. Tell them not to mention that I have 300 or 400 other awards. That's not important. Tell them not to mention where I went to school. I'd like somebody to mention that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to give his life serving others. I'd like for somebody to say that day that Martin Luther King Jr. tried to love somebody. I want you to be able to say that day that I did try to feed the hungry. And I want you to be able to say that day that I did try in my life to clothe those who were naked. And I want you to say on that day that I did try in my life to visit those who were in prison. I want you to say, I tried to love and serve humanity. Yes, if you want to say that I was a leader, say I was a leader for justice. Say that I was a leader for peace. I was a leader for righteousness. And all of the other shallow things will not matter. I won't have any money to leave behind. I won't have the fine and luxurious things of life to leave behind. But I just want to leave a committed life behind. Yes, Jesus, I want to be on your right or your left side, not for any selfish reason. I want to be on your right or your left side, not in terms of some political kingdom or ambition, but I just want to be there in love and in justice and in truth and in commitment to others so that we can make of this old world a new world. As we move into our treatment, we recognize that we are the presence. That essence that is the foundation of life, the foundation of love. We're it. We're made of it. It is our purpose to express it fully. And so in this moment, we lay the new foundation. The new foundation so that we can begin to have our new day, our new week, our new year. That foundation of wanting the presence to be present more than anything. Of reordering our priorities. Of realizing that this essence of God simply wants to express itself in all of our doings, in all of our beings. And that at every moment we can be new. Every moment we can check within. We can be on that different foundation. Because the presence is eternally speaking to each of us, as each of us, directing, guiding, loving, accepting. So in this awareness, we set perhaps any intention, knowing that the presence meets us fully in being that new being of love. I'm just so grateful to know that this is the truth. This is the way it is. And so I release it into that law of love. And so it is. Amen.